Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teens from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. Hey everyone, real quick before we get the show started, I want to share with you something that we're really excited about. Mike and I launched Principles of Program Design just about 2 years ago. And since then, we've been working really hard on building more and more content. And we're finally ready to release some of that great new stuff. We're having a updated version of our original online foundations course where we've added 3 new bonus chapters. We've also updated our live course, and we're going to be doing that in April at Skill of Strength in Massachusetts. We also have 3 brand new online courses, including our exercise coach course, where we teach you our belt system of how we progress and regress and coach exercises, as well as group mastery, where Mike shares his systems for how he implements his successful group fitness training programs up at Skill of Strength, as well as something called Primed, where we teach you about programming warm-ups. And then in addition to that, we're also launching a virtual mentorship where we're going to work hands-on with a select handful of coaches and trainers working with you every week on how to develop the best systems and programs to build a successful career. And then in addition to that, we're putting together a free ebook as well as a supporting webinar where we're going to give you our top 10 tips to a successful career in the fitness industry. We're going to share with you our secrets and our systems that we use that have helped us open up our facilities, as well as speak around the world and work with some of the best athletes out there. And so to get more information on all of this, go to principleswebinar.com and you can find out about all the new and exciting stuff. Now, let's get ready to get started with the show. And away we go. Here we go with the Principles of Performance podcast. I am your host, Eric DeGatti, along with my friend and co-host, Mike Perry. We are at episode number 61. And Mike, we got something a little different today for the audience.
Yeah, normally we have some incredible guests that, share a ton of knowledge with us. But today you're going to have to listen to us to talk about training. Honestly, we've been in this for a long time, combined almost 50 years. And we have learned a lot because we've also messed up a lot. But fortunately for us, we've been able to learn from those mistakes and have some success in our given field. And today we're going to talk about, a couple things, but it's really about how we've designed these systems over time to trim the fat, to really find ways to build a sustainable business, but also at the same time, make sure that your clients are continuing to reach their goals. They understand the process. And really what this is about is just teaching you how to interact with people in a much deeper way, in a much more meaningful way than just trying to really get a sale. And that's what it's all about. And that's why I'm really pumped to talk to you about today's podcast.
Yeah, so the timing of it, we've really lucked out. And 60 episodes in, we've had some really incredible guests so far. And along the way, Mike and I in our meetings keep talking about how we want to share some of the information that we're releasing in our new courses that launch on September 15th. So we said, why don't we start sneaking in some podcasts that show some elements of what we're working on? And the one thing that we talked about quite a bit and that we share is the fitness client journey. All right. And we're going to kind of talk about it from both sides. We want to talk about it from the pros side as a trainer, coach, even clinician, what the process should be before that person even walks in the door to when they walk in the door to keeping them in the door, and everything that goes into that. And then also understanding it from the other side of things and understanding it from the client's perspective and from the patient's perspective of what are some of the things that we should be thinking about and maybe some of the things we really need to do better. So one of the things we always talk about, and Mike's a huge Simon Sinek fan, is starting with why. Like, why are we even doing this? Why are we doing this professionally? And then why is this person here? Like, if you don't know why they're here and you just start jumping in, then it's more about you. It's not about them. And unfortunately, that's what we do a lot. And Mike, you may know the stat. I know someone's talking about this in one of our calls. Like the average time, I think they time physical therapists. The average time that they actually listen to their patients in an initial consult, I think it was like 8 seconds, like something crazy like that, right? And so, like, there's no way the person on the receiving end of that feels like this is about them. This is totally about whatever my thing is. And so in our live course, we do a thing where we kind of poke people a little bit and we say, what's your thing? And what do we mean by that? We mean, if someone were to introduce you, give kind of the elevator pitch for you, say, hey, I want you to meet Mike. Mike, he's my trainer and he's a blank. What are they going to say? They're going to say, well, he's a kettlebell guy. He's an FMS guy. He's whatever. What is that label? And honestly, if you looked yourself in the mirror, what's that label that you've kind of had slapped on you? And both of us have had the FMS label slapped on us. And well, hey, look, I've taught for them for 15 years. Mike, you're on what, 8 or 10 years teaching with them. So rightfully, we are FMS guys. But if you think all we do is stand around with test kits and test people's leg raises and do corrective exercise all day, it's a huge foundation what we do, but it's not all we do by any means. And so talk about, Mike, a little bit about how we can get people to what we say, get out of your silo.
Well, I think the first step is awareness. And I think a lot of people don't even realize they're in a silo. And, when we're talking about the what's your thing situation, and everybody's got a thing, but the problem is people that have their own confirmation bias and people that are so in love with their thing, they don't often realize the limitations of their thing. Right. And then it starts becoming the situation where, they start this creative process, but they start to overreach and they start to make up things that really, really don't fit because it doesn't really just align up with what they're trying to do. So what we need to understand is it's cool to have a thing, but if you are going to have your thing, you need to understand the limitations of that because you're going to attract certain individuals with a niche, but also because you are a niche individual, you need to also understand not everybody's going to come through the door and work for you. So, or want to work with you. So you need to know sort of the intricacies of having a thing and being siloed, because if you're going to silo yourself, you better be the best in the world in that niche so you can attract the best. But it's really hard to become the best. So we have to be able to peek ourselves out of that silo and look around and say, are there other ways to do this? Are there better ways to help my clients? Are there different approaches that I can potentially take to help this individual? And I think we have to step back and always look through the different types of lenses in order to make decisions that are going to be the best for our clients.
So I've been thinking about this a lot and taking it in context with some other things, and whether it was real life experiences. Like there was a guy who was in business, actually in the town that I was in business at one time. And he was a really well-known strength guy, like champion power lifter, the whole deal. And he kind of got to next level, not necessarily credibility, but fame and notoriety because he worked with a pretty well-known NFL player. Now, what happened was that player, the one thing that player really needed to get to the next level was strength. And this guy was really good at strength. So it was perfect. It was square peg, square hole. Now, the problem is that the 5 people that come in after them that think they're going to get the same results, they're round or triangle pegs, and they're not going to get that same result. And he's chewing them up and spitting them out. And so if what I also realize is as I'm starting to learn a whole lot more on things outside within the fitness industry, especially as we kind of preparing for this launch. And Mike's heard me talk on and on about some of the business stuff I've been learning and getting totally into Alex Hormozy and all these different people who are brilliant business minds. And they talk about how the riches are in the niches, and that if you really want to separate yourself and you just go out and say, oh, I train everybody. Well, you can stand in Times Square, and can you train everybody there? Like, how do you market to that? And I think that's true. But I think on the training side, I think you're really limited if you keep yourself into only one way to train. In terms of
100%.
how you train, I think find a niche. In terms of how you train, I think if you only have one way and your only thing is kettlebells, or your only thing is mobility work or corrective exercise or sprint work, whatever it is, then you're missing out on a whole lot of stuff. And so I think one of the things that's benefited me most in my career is learning from so many different disciplines. When I was kind of coming up, my brother was going to PT school, and I would take his Shirley Sarman books and his Yonda books and learn all that stuff. I would learn about other things outside of the general fitness circles, and learn things like about Feldenkrais and Rolfing, and learn about Alexander technique and all these things that were non-traditional things. And how do I blend this all into a soup that makes me so unique and so more well prepared than any other coaches or trainers that I'm competing against?
Yeah, and I think based off of the niche conversation, it's important to differentiate the difference between a niche and a modality. Like a modality is like if you're a kettlebell, cool. So the modality or the weapon of choice is the kettlebell, but the niche could be, well, you train fighters or you train baseball players, but the difference is are you, like you said, are you forcing the modality down the throat of someone who does not need it or is not going to benefit from it? But like you said, the outlier, it's like square peg, square hole. It's like perfect, it's going to fit. But the problem is that's like having your first client be a professional athlete and they never couldn't, but you take the credit because they were successful. But look, if you start to work with a genetic freak and they pick the right parents and they're already an outlier, like, just don't screw them up and they're going to do very, very well. But here's the scoop. They never couldn't. So you think that you did this wonderful thing with this individual that was so gifted, but they were just gifted and you hit the lottery. Now, what's going to happen when you try to scale that and open a business because you've had so much success with the NFL guy or the MLS guy or whatever it is? What's going to happen when you want to scale that and you want to do that again and you don't get that outlier? What systems do you have? What's your starting point? How are you going to be able to make that work? Because you have no idea, because it came so easy early on. And that's one of the issues that most people have, is maybe they strike gold here or there, but when the rubber meets the road, if they don't have scalable and repeatable ways to get people through the door, to coach, to teach, to retain, man, it doesn't matter. And I see that time and time again.
I actually had a cool experience. It's funny you mentioned it. Just literally this morning, that a client I was working with, and talking about like the difference between being good versus really good versus great, and having the systems there. So like this is a guy who came in, super athletic, former athlete, who's had a ton of upper body issues between neck and shoulder and T-spine and rib cage, just constantly uncomfortable to the point where he's having neck issues, getting tingling in his hands, and came to me because he had tried everything else: chiropractor, physical therapist, neuros, dermatologist, you name it, and gotten no answers. And so the first step was, kind of putting him through the basics of, okay, well, let's just see what your movement looks like. Let's put you the very basic FMS. Let's put you through some general testing, and we found some holes in there. And so we said, okay, let's address those first. At the same time, like, he had been told, you can't work out, you got to stop working out, and he was, really feeling crap. So now that creates this kind of downward cycle that he's in, because he feels like crap. He's like, I'm a mushy mess. So I'm like, I got to figure out a way that you can still work out while we're doing this simultaneously. And that becomes a little bit more artful. You got to have some systems for that. Right. So he gave it to him. So not only has the guy decreased his symptoms 75%, if not more, within a week or two, but he's also put on a significant amount of lean body mass. He's lost body fat. Like, so everything's going great. Okay. So most trainers, you and I could teach to do that, what we did, in probably a day, if not less. Right. And on top of that, just being able to do that separates you from 90% of the industry there. Like, you're already in the top 10% just doing that. Now, where do you get to the top 2 or 5% is when he comes back and says, look, I'm 75% of the way, but I still have some stuff going on. And now today I test him, and his FMS is great. His motor control screen is great. His grip strength is great. All his orthopedic tests are great. Okay, why are you still having this issue? All right, now I got to dive a little bit deeper. And if I was only an FMS guy, I'd be screwed because I had nothing else to throw at him. I'd have to refer him out to somebody. But started looking at some other stuff, looked at his breathing, looked at his conditioning, looked at some of those other things, realized he kind of has a capacity issue going on. And I had more tools in the toolbox to go to. That's really the difference maker. And really, even that's kind of easy to teach. It's just having the right checklist. So that's really what we talk about when kind of say get out of that silo and have as many things in your arsenal as possible, but you don't use them all on day one. I'm not going to try to show you every trick in the book day one. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about day one of where we screw it up and where it can go right.
Yeah, and before we do, I just want to add on one thing is the most successful coaches out there, um, they are gifted, but they have systems. And that's really what it's all about. Most of the top 1% of the people out there, they have systems. If they may not even know that they have systems, but they have systems, and you can only get so far without it. And that is why we are so adamant about that. You got to get the systems, and that's what's going to allow you to become a better coach and a more productive coach, and it will allow you to coach, not just sit and be in front of a spreadsheet all day. So, but moving on.
So with that, let me jump in real quick. I gave spoke at a conference once, and I talked about the difference between there's two types of great people in our business. There's wizards, right? And we know some of them, right? Gray Cook, Bernard Horbakosh, Charlie Weingroff. These type of people are gifted. Like they can walk in a room and like use the force, and like your shoulder gets better. Like they have a gift. And but even Gray says, he goes, I may skip steps, but I never miss steps. Where, I think we're just really good system managers. Like we just know I have a checklist. Okay, do I have all these boxes checked? If yes, then go to here. If no, then go to here. And eventually I'm going to find that box that's not checked and I'm going to hammer that. And that's usually how it gets found.
It's honestly the best coaches and clinicians are problem solvers with systems. That's it. Problem solvers 100%. With systems. That's all it is. So, but like you said earlier, we kind of screwed up. We screwed up a lot. And I say that because I have done probably 7 consultations this week. And I think about the way that I do consultations now and the way that I interact with individuals on day one or when it's time for their evaluation versus the way that I used to. And man, I'm surprised people even signed up with me based off of what I used to do. But now I'm like, man, we've been refining this. It's one of those situations. Once you get that system and you try to poke holes through the system, it becomes that much easier. But man, there are some days that you screw it up. And I think back to, some of the decisions I've made early on. And man, there's been some crazy ones where I missed the boat on certain things.
Yeah. And I think early on when you're young and you just learned all this information, I got my certification and I can't wait to tell everybody how smart I am and show them all the exercise I know and all the things I know and all the fancy Latin terms that I know. Right. When you forget that, like where they're coming from, like that person might have, had your name and number on their to-do list for 6 months, right? They might have, driven to the gym 4 times before they actually had the guts to go in there. I think you had a great line that you used this week in your newsletter, like the heaviest weight in the gym is that front door. And they finally get the courage to come in and you sit there kind of like an asshole and talk about you for half an hour. Right. And you wonder why people get turned off and realize, oh, this isn't really for me. Or even if they do buy in and say, all right, I'll take it because I don't think there's another better option. If I show them a better option down the street, I win, or they're going to come to you and realize, well, maybe this isn't they fail. And because it wasn't about them. And some of that comes down to, obviously you got to have good communication skills. Go back if you want to learn that, go back, listen to the episode we did with Jenny Rierich. She's masterful at that. But also what we have a whole section in our course called the key questions and asking the right questions. Because we say, if you miss any one of these, you're going to completely miss the boat on your training. So like the easy example I talk about is let's say you don't ask, like, what do you do for a living? And what does your typical day look like? And you find out you're working with a guy who's a mason. And then in your program, you give this guy farmer's walks. Like this guy's been carrying cinder blocks all day. The last thing he wants to do is carry kettlebells for walking around. Like, first of all, it's not going to do anything for him. He already has that. And it's like the last thing he needs of all the things he needs. Like, so if you miss that question, or if you don't ask the question of, hey, what have you been successful with? What have you not been successful with? Like how many times have you had somebody come in and they're afraid of kettlebells? Or I had a woman who was afraid of the cable machine. It's like the most docile. It's like the teddy bear of the equipment. But she got hurt once on a cable machine, and she's convinced it was the cable machine. Um, you tell a story of an NFL guy who swore up and down that knee extensions fix his knee, right?
Hey, and at first I thought to myself, that was the dumbest thing on the planet. But after that, you do as many knee extensions as you want to do, my friend, because if that makes you happy and that makes you believe that's going to help your knee, you knee extension the hell out of it.
Unless his evaluation gives you a reason not to, right?
100%. And that was the thing. He was clean. He had a great FMS. He looked awesome. He just always did it. So I was like, man, I'm not going to take away your habit. I'm not going to take away your binky. And if it's not hurting you, pump those quads, man.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta get out of your own way sometimes. And so I just did a post yesterday, and it was about how your assessment writes your program for me, right? Is that I think in terms of going back to the silos and the niches and our why and our mindset going into it is, as I've evolved and matured as a professional, I think one of the biggest revelations is when you can get to the comfort level where I really don't give a shit what I do with you, right? Like whether we end up doing, um, thoracic rotation, whether we end up doing speed drills, whether we end up doing bench press, I really don't care. I've seen enough exercises done enough times that I have no vested interest. I get no kickback if we do deadlifts versus, arm bars. So like, I don't really care what you do. So so how do I pick the exercises? Well, you're going to pick them for me, and you're going to pick them by telling me what I see in your assessment. If your assessment, like you just talked about, you have an assessment that's clean, well, then I have a huge menu to choose from. So like the analogy that I use is I tell everybody, I say, okay, imagine that gym wall and it's filled with every exercise we could possibly think of. And the analogy I use is like the Cheesecake Factory menu. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you go to Cheesecake Factory and they give you a Bible as a menu. And it takes everybody, 45 minutes to figure out what appetizer is going to order because there's too many options. Right. So imagine if all the exercises in the world are like that Cheesecake Factory menu, but then you go into the Cheesecake Factory and, oh, well, I don't like red meat. I have an allergy to gluten. I have this. Well, now that menu starts getting chopped down. And that's really what your assessment does. It says, okay, well, this person doesn't have ankle mobility. Well, we know there's a bunch of activities that probably aren't going to be suited for you because of that lack of ankle mobility. And now the menu gets trimmed down and trimmed down and trimmed down. And now I have a couple different options. And then even when I get to those options, we teach a course on programming. When we do case studies with people, you may have 5 people give 5 different exercises for the same person. They all could be right. And so we don't even really care which version of the squat you do, provided their assessment didn't tell you they can't do it otherwise. So talk a little bit about how like data collection and, evaluation testing gets interpreted, and B, how does it actually change the program?
I think for the new individuals starting at a gym, the idea of an evaluation can be somewhat tough for them to sort of understand the process. They feel like they're being tested. They feel like they're being judged. So I think right away, when we talk about this process, we really need to educate them in a gentle fashion because maybe they've never been assessed. Maybe they think they're being judged, or they think it's some sort of performance testing in which they're going to be compared to other individuals. And here's the way that I look at it: as I say, look, we are on a fact-finding mission. So we can understand to the best of our ability with the information that we have today what the best direction is for you as far as exercise goes. It's not a pass or fail. It's simply information so we can make the best decision possible for you so you can move forward and continue to make process. And that is what the evaluation process is all about. It's just information so we can make better decisions for your training program, or maybe it's for a personal training, or maybe it's for a group training scenario. So it's really non sort of biased information, and which will allow us to make better decisions from a training standpoint. That is the point of the movement standpoint. But also we have to take into consideration what tests are appropriate, because the tests that you're going to use for a 45-year-old mother of 3 is going to be very, very different than the test you might use for a senior or an individual that's a senior and they play football and they're trying to play in college. So I think one of the things people start off and they goof up is just the importance of testing, but the appropriate testing and how to communicate the testing.
Yeah, and also understanding that part of your testing is a baseline, because you want to be able to show people that they're making progress. And I say, look, you live in that body, you're not going to notice it like I can, and the data will back that up. You know, I'm going back to the client I was talking about earlier. He couldn't believe that he's like, I don't feel that different, but he goes, but the numbers show I'm 8 pounds heavier, my body fat's down, my scores are all up in my movement, all those things changed. And it's not like I'm making that up. He sees the same digits come up on the grip strength holder that I do. Now, from the perspective, a couple different things on this. From the perspective of the client, like if you're not asking these, if you're going in and saying, I got to choose a coach or a trainer or a program, and they're not doing any level of questioning or evaluation or finding out where you're at, or any fact finding, to use your term, of my injury history, my medical history, my exercise history, and they're just throwing me to the wolves, you got to be a little careful. All right. And that'll come back to the point of whether are you getting just a workout or are you getting a program. Then there's also the,
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll come back to that. But there's also the point of this. Here's the other part where evaluation gets screwed up. And I see this, because I do a lot of work in the baseball world, where the evaluation is nothing but eyewash, right? Because especially we have so much tech, like they'll come in and they'll get all these different motion capture testings, and they'll get all these different detailed assessments. And then they end up going and saying, I got the same program as everybody else at the end of the day. It didn't matter, right? All that stuff was just eye candy just to get me in the door, but it didn't affect my programming at all. I'm doing the same program as everybody else. And so we see that even in the clinical world, you see clinicians will come in and they'll do their eval, and then they realize, okay, I'm sitting down and I got the same shoulder protocol as this, old lady with a frozen shoulder next to me, but yet I'm a baseball player who throws 90 miles an hour trying to play professionally. This doesn't add up. I think that helps drive to get people to understand that this is about them, when you can connect all those dots to say, okay, remember when you came in and you couldn't even touch your toes? Well, look what it feels like now. You couldn't even get a bar behind your back, let alone be able to do anything once it was there. All those little things that can be great reminders that, hey, you're progressing here, and we're getting somewhere. Now, going back to how it helps drive decisions, like the first thing that everybody leans towards is, okay, well, what exercise I'm going to do. So obviously, because of our background with FMS and all that stuff, everybody thinks, okay, in terms of movement, that we're really focused on really specific movements, when really it's just breaking it down into buckets, and buckets meaning that we have these patterns that every movement comes from. And one of my mentors, I did 2 years of Paul Check's internship. He used a great analogy that I use with clients. Say it's like the keys on a calculator, right? 0 through 9 make every single number in the world. And how you utilize those 10 digits is really just comes down to your math skill. But let's say you have a broken 7 button. Well, number one is you're not going to be able to express that skill as well. So even if you're really good at math, you have to work around that thing, and it's going to slow down your performance. It's going to affect your performance, your ability to express your skill. Two is if you keep working around it long enough, you're going to make a mistake. Well, mistakes in your body are pulled hamstrings. They're, strained low backs. They're, rolled ankles. There's that sort of thing, because you were working around something that was a roadblock, or a piece of a pattern that you didn't really have. And so we look at movement kind of in terms of making intelligent exercise choices. Talk a little bit about the process of how we make those choices.
Well, I think, one of the things that we see in the fitness industry is, and we've heard this, do not load dysfunction, right? And I think the word dysfunction is first of all, a word that needs to be used in the context of trainer to trainer and clinician to trainer, versus we should never be using that term in my mind with a client in general. But we need to make decisions that are going to be appropriate for those individuals where they're currently at, because it's going to change over time. And I think that's one thing people need to understand about the evaluation process is, yes, there is a formal evaluation at the beginning, but there's also a constant evaluation. And that's just called coaching. It's paying attention and making changes on the fly, and understanding that, there are certain things. But look, when we run people through the evaluation and we're looking at larger global movement patterns, It's really like a traffic light system. It's like, hey, right now, shouldn't do this. But here's the scoop, right? If you take something off the menu for someone, right? And you say, hey, look, I don't think you should do this right now. You need to provide a why. And that's another thing people don't do. It's just like, don't take away their favorite toy. If you're going to take away something, you just provide context or don't even say anything. But my point is that you want to take away the things that are going to potentially not be beneficial, because right away, it just makes your decision-making process that much better, right? If we're talking about a traffic light, those are your red lights, right? Which gives us some other options. So we need to find starting points in all those patterns, and we know what the patterns are. We've got our squat pattern, we've got our hinge pattern, and then we've got single leg variations of all those and split stance sort of variations of all those. So we need to fill sort of the pattern buckets. And when we're looking at lower body, we look at bilateral, split stance, and single leg. But within those buckets, there's variation. So we need to understand, based off of the evaluation, is this pattern appropriate to introduce right now? And if so, where's the right starting point? But at the same time, do we not do this pattern? And what are they prerequisite movements or positions that will set us up to get there? So understand that when you start off and you have a limited menu, that limited menu is not forever. It's just a limited menu for now. And as you start to acquire skill and get a little bit stronger and get a little bit more coordinated, well, guess what? Or even when you move a little bit better, then you're going to have more options on the menu. So you may start off with a smaller menu, but eventually we're going to add more things and you're going to have more options and you're going to have a lot more fun. But man, if you start off at a point where you're really not capable of doing anything, it's going to be tough, because the menu is going to be limited, and it's not always going to be the sexiest, most entertaining thing, because we need to make progress. We're not here to just provide you with, Instagram videos and, ab shots and etc. So there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
Yeah, you can't just take away without giving a reason. You also can't take away without the intention of the goal of giving some form of that back to them, right? So if
100%.
someone can't hinge well, I'm going to say, okay, well, here's why we're taking these hinging activities, whether it's box jumps or kettlebell swings or deadlifts. We're taking them away temporarily until we can get you to
Mm-hmm.
hinge really well and naturally and reflexively, and then I'm going to give you some level of hinge back. Does that mean everybody has to get back to barbell deadlift? No, it means I'm going to give you some level of a deadlift back. And then in the meantime, I got to replace that with something else. So, the big one we talk about all the time is you have someone who's an avid runner and you realize that they don't really have the movement competency to run. If you just tell them don't run, guess what? They're going to run anyway. And so you're going to,
Yeah.
so, okay, what's going to be my adult conversation I have with them to say, okay, look, I know you love to run. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to give you to replace that activity that won't affect you from a structural, cost standpoint, while we're fixing and getting you to be able to get better ankle mobility or hip mobility or core control, whatever it is they're lacking. And then in the meantime, let's do this activity instead, whether it's an assault bike or something like that, that'll still get your endorphins, that'll still get your conditioning up, that'll still burn the calories, that'll do all those things that you get out of running, except for the actual running on the road. Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out where you can find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show. Now, sometimes, and I realize it's perfect world that we can do these assessments and we can really dial in programs, but we don't always get that opportunity. I work with high school teams. I don't get to do really any level of assessing or testing, because it's such a fluid situation with kids going in and out of different sports from one season to the next, with not having the time or the access or the staffing or the wherewithal to do that. So I have to do the best I can, kind of knowing on some generalities. Is it as good as it can be? No, I know it can't be, but it's going to be better than anything else. And so, like, even in the course of a warm up, we can address some of those things. Like, you have a brilliant system called the 2-4-4 system that we have a whole course that we built around on how to program warm ups, but it's really just addressing the most common flaws we see in movement. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've been working for FMS for, yeah, going on 8 years now. And one of the things that we do see, and this is based off of the data and the research, and it's just, also based off of what I've been seeing in the last, decade at my gym is, look, about 2/3 of the population is going to have ankle, shoulder, T-spine, and some sort of hip mobility restriction. And we assess every single individual that comes through the door. But we also understand that even if we give them homework, they're not going to do it. I actually say to them, hey, if I give you 2 to 3 drills every day to clean this up, will you do it? And they'll be like, no. I'm like, cool, not a problem, man. Like, thank you for the honesty, because now I don't have to put that video together. No, but seriously, like, I think the most important thing is that when you do design a system where you can't, I'm sorry, let me backtrack. In a group training environment, you have to make decisions that are going to be beneficial for the majority of the individuals attending. So you have to create sort of catch-alls, and you have to create programs and warm-ups and situations and templates that are going to be beneficial for 85% of the individuals right there. So what do? Well, we know that, okay, a lot of people need ankle mobility work. So what do? We spend, we give them 2 different ankle mobility exercises. Sometimes we're focusing on soft tissue on the, on the posterior side. Sometimes we're working on the actual joint, trying to, get a little bit more mobility out of the ankle joint. So we're going to do a couple drills to really open up those ankles, because if you think about why the ankle is important, you need ankle mobility and stability on all of your lower body patterns, 2-legged, split stance, and single-legged, right? So you need to have some decent ankle mobility, specifically dorsiflexion, but yes, plantar is important. And then depending on what's going on that day, we're going to do a bunch of hip mobility drills that are going to direct you and prepare you for what's going to happen in the lifts. So guess what? The exercises that you do in the warm-up are going to prepare you for the lifts. So guess what? If you're doing a bilateral lift, like a squat or a deadlift, maybe you should do some bilateral prep. Same thing with split stance, and same thing with single leg. And then lastly, as we get to the upper body, we do another 4 drills, and that is just hitting the T-spine and hitting the shoulders, because we know that people lose their ability to rotate their thoracic spine, to bend and flex their T-spine, to move around the rib cage as well, and we get stuck. So we program in drills to move their T-spine, rib cage, and eventually their glenohumeral joint. So what we do is we know that people are coming in with movement competency-based issues. So what do? We create a systematic approach to try to catch as many of those as possible in the warm-up. And then we have incredible systems where we can progress and regress individuals pretty much on the fly, but the systems are written for us. And that's the beauty of it, because you're no longer guessing, you're just following the system. And that is something that we've been working on. And we actually have almost like a similar belt system that we see in the world of martial arts. And the belt systems are systems for a reason, and everything we do has a system, but we've vetted the creative process. So anytime you're making something up, or anytime you're getting creative, I want you to have some principle-based creativity, right? Have a reason why you're doing things. But in our warm course, man, we teach you everything. We teach you the different drills, the whys, the coaching, the cueing. And I tell you what, if you follow that template, man, it's going to make your life that much easier, because it's really, really just plug and play. And look, we've been using this for a decade, and it works because our clients move well. They're strong. We have minimal injuries, and man, it makes a huge difference when you do it right, and you have systems that work, and they're repetitive. And not only can you run them, but everybody else in the facility knows how to apply those systems. Therefore, you just have a more consistent product, and that's never a bad thing, especially in the service-related industry.
So one last note on the movement standpoint, and again, flipping it to having the empathy from the client side. And I think that's one of the things that we, of kind of human qualities that we don't have enough of as coaches and trainers and pros, is empathy and understanding, like we get this frustration when we're trying to teach somebody a new movement. And I say there's bilateral conversations going on in both of your heads. I said, as the coach or trainer, we've all stood there and trying to teach somebody a new movement. And in our head, we're saying, what is wrong with this person? Why can't this idiot do this exercise? And then you know what your client is saying the whole time? They're saying, what's wrong with this idiot? Why can't he or she understand I can't do this exercise? And right. And so you're both getting frustrated and think the other person's an idiot, when meanwhile, it's just a matter of having that understanding and empathy. So, like, the simplest way I describe it, and we'll do this hands on when I teach, is I'll tell people, okay, go fold your arms, right? And people fold their arms. And I say, okay, now take your hands and switch them, go the opposite way. And it feels like really bizarre. It's totally weird. And like people can't even do it sometimes. And I say, okay, you know how awkward and weird and unnatural that feels? Well, that's how your client feels every time you teach them a new movement. Like, you may know deadlifts and hip hinging really well because you've done a million of them. Well, this client's never done a hip hinge. So you have to be a little bit more empathetic to that learning process and get really good at your communication and getting to understand a better concept of how motor learning actually happens. And it's not just about picking an exercise and assigning it reps and sets. And then if we take it a step further and we say, okay, well, what's the difference? And I kind of had this thought the other day when we were working on some of our content, and say, okay, well, I've been in, this is year 25 for me, you're going on year 20, and say, okay, well, how did I survive this long? Because we were doing research and it was scary. Like, the average career in the fitness industry is 6 to 24 months. Like, that's a half a year to 2 years that most people get in this business. Say, hey, I love fitness, I want to be a fitness, professional, a trainer, a coach, and then they're gone usually within a year or so. And so I said, how did I last 25 years? I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So it's like, hey, what did I do right? Because as you said earlier, we've certainly done enough wrong. And so one is understanding the difference between a program and a workout, right? We mentioned this earlier. Like, anybody can give you workouts, especially now. I can go on YouTube, get a free workout. There's all these different apps that give me free workouts. Or even if I want to go and go to a physical location to get a workout, I have options like Orange Theory. I have CrossFit. I have the local boot camp. I have F45. I have all these places, and they'll give me a workout. Where if I'm now trying to be a fitness professional, a coach or trainer, and I'm trying to compete with that, they got way better brand recognition. They're considered way cooler. They have way more advertising dollars. They have way more money they can invest in facilities and equipment. I have no chance to go up against that. If it's just my workouts versus their workouts, I'm going to lose every single time. And overall, the last 25 years, I've seen so many people around me open and close. I've literally had gyms. My landlord at my first location opened up a gym underneath me, like literally underneath me, and they open and close in the span we were there. So the difference was we were selling programs. Workouts I can get anywhere, and workouts I'll come for a couple workouts. It was fun, it was cool, but then I'm going to go to the next place with workouts. Programs, okay, this is about me. And so we talk about how your business is about retention. We did stats when I had my facility, and from the newest client that signed up that morning to clients who were with us forever, those were all counted in. From my newest, most novice trainer up to me, we counted those all in. And our average retention was 1.9 years. When most people are signing up for training, they're doing a 6-week program, a 10-pack, something like that. So, like, great, you can get all the new clients you want, but if you can't keep them, and what keeps them is your programs, if you can't keep them, then you got to reload that bucket all the time. And eventually, it's you're going to run out. You're not going to be able to have enough lead magnets. You're not going to be able to do enough Facebook ads to keep filling a bucket with a hole in the bottom of it.
Yeah. So it's funny to see how, not even funny. Funny is not a good word, but if you look at sort of the industry in general, right? We've seen people come and go, like you've said, come and go, come and go. And then when COVID hit, especially, we saw a lot of people. I think a lot of people didn't truly understand the fragility of their business when COVID hit. They didn't understand how much it could potentially impact them. And look, COVID is what it is. It was awful. It sucked. It was an awful, awful thing. But I will tell you this, the businesses that had good coaches, really, really solid systems that cared a lot about their clients, those are the ones that withstood a global pandemic. And, a lot of them are thriving on the other side now. And I can honestly say, because I know the gyms, we're one of them. I can honestly say, if we didn't have the systems and we didn't have the knowledge and we didn't run the business the way that we did, and we didn't develop that rapport with our clients, we wouldn't have made it. So, obviously we talk about this and we're trying to teach you the basics of this journey, but I'm going to be honest, like, this is the stuff that will save a business. This is the stuff that will keep your business going through the really, really hard stuff. And look, running a business and having a gym is hard to begin with. Imagine doing that through a pandemic. And look, the systems that we're going to teach you are the systems that we've been implementing, both of us. And that allowed us to stay busy and to work with individuals in a creative fashion through a global pandemic. So look, this is the stuff, this works. And imagine if you take these systems and you apply them in a way that you don't have to deal with a global pandemic, right? We're at the other end at this point. Now this is an opportune time to really make an impact on your community. If you can get your systems down and you can train the heck out of people, you are going to impact a lot of people and you'll never be busy. But if you're doing it on sheer talent alone, it's not going to work. And that's why you need to have better systems and you need to have something that is repeatable and sustainable.
So we talked about kind of the three paths, if not, combination of two or all three that most trainers set out that they want to be able to do as part of their career. One is everybody wants to have either the high profile and or high ticket clients, right? I want to train big money people. I want to train big names that I can post on Instagram, hang pictures on the wall. And or they want to become a leader in the industry. They want to be out and teach workshops. They want to be in the front of the room at the conference. They want to be able to sell their own training courses. Or to your point, they want to open up their own facility. And fortunately for us, we've been able to do all three at a pretty high level at some point in our career. And both of us being facility owners, one of the challenges there is, right, how does that come about? I become really popular as a trainer. And I think I can't handle all this. If I could just scale, I'll open a facility and I'll get trainers to work underneath me, and then everybody will come and train with them. Well, they're not you, right? And so everybody walks in the door, they want to train with Mike, they want to train with Eric. And so how do I get them to replicate and kind of clone me? And that comes down to systems. And then in terms of scalability, there's only so much of us to go around. If you think when we talk about programs that every single time that new person walks in, we're taking out a blank sheet of white paper and starting from scratch, there's no way that's scalable or feasible, right? And so we know that there's certain kind of lanes that people fit within, right? So that we have kind of general templates that we work off of, and then just knowing how to bump those templates one way or the other is really the art of it. To say, okay, well, if I had this base template, and we have a whole algorithm that we created in our one course, and basically the base template that everything works off of is based on the premise that if and Mike, if when you're in this industry long enough, you go to any social event, people say, hey, can you give me a workout? Right? So if you said to me, I have no limitations whatsoever, I have no specific goal other than just get more fit, could you write me a general program? Then yeah, we could probably sit down and write something, and Mike's program wouldn't look the same as mine, but we can come up with something. But then you start talking more to the person, they're like, well, and then you got to consider I have a bad knee, and you also consider I don't have a lot of time, and also consider I don't have a lot of access to equipment, or the gym I work at doesn't have a lot of space, or all these things start to come up. And now, okay, well, now I got to completely rearrange this thing. And so now you have to have a system to know, how do I know what to pull out? How do I know what to put in? And so that's really how you mix and match. It doesn't start from scratch, a blank sheet of paper every time, or you're going to go mad. You're never going to have enough hours in the day.
Yeah, think of it as the difference between a scratch kitchen and Chipotle, right? If you go to a scratch kitchen, they are literally starting from scratch, like with basic ingredients. And yeah, you can make money because if you're in a scratch kitchen and you're a good chef, you're going to charge a lot of money for that meal. But you're not going to be able to churn out a lot of those meals because it's too time intensive. But you go to Chipotle, you're getting a customized burrito bowl, but you're just adding your own ingredients. But the basic ingredients are there, right? You've got your rice, and you've got your proteins, and you've got your veggies, and this and that. And it's the same thing with training. Could you be a scratch kitchen and write a brand new soup to nuts 4 to 5 week program for someone? Absolutely. But over time, it's a waste of time because you're going to end up, once you write 10 or 12 of those built from scratch programs, you know what they are? They're going to look the same anyways. So why don't you find a better way to create templates that 75% of those templates are what you need, and then you change the veggies, and maybe you change the starch, or maybe you just change the spices. But at the end of the day, you've got a systematic approach. So you're not recreating a meal. All you're doing is you're changing the toppings and the different, and the different sort of changes to that meal. And that is why Chipotle is going to make a lot more money than the dude that has the scratch kitchen up the street, because he's just a really good cook without systems. And sure, if you want a fancy meal and you want to pay more money, cool. But that guy is going to be cooking scratch meals until he dies, because he's never going to have systems to teach other people how to make meals that are almost as good, but way more efficient.
Yeah, he's essentially like in our business, he's just trading dollars for hours. Now you can do
100%.
that
And
at a
it'll
high
work.
level and it
It'll
works.
work.
And if you're good with that, but at some point, if you wanted to scale or have something that's beyond that, and so with that, you have to have going back to those checklists. And so now Chipotle wouldn't work, right? If they had different ingredients every day. If you
No.
had Mr. Chipotle went out to the market every day and picked out whatever the fresh
Yeah.
vegetables of the day were, it'd be chaos, right? And so
Yeah. You'd be like, I'm
so
allergic to that.
so
Right.
what with working out, instead of, they have their staples of, they have, okay, we have this chicken, we have this beef, we have this vegetable, right? This pork, those are options, right? And then we have these. So that's how you work through the line. So the same thing is with exercise. We have 10 program elements. These are the 10 elements you need to consider, right? And then we break those elements down into categories of, some of these elements you don't get to pick, right? They're driven by the organism. That's driven by the person, the team, the group, whoever's in front of you. You don't get to pick your client's goals. You don't get to pick their training history. You don't get to pick any of the. You don't get to pick their time and their schedule, right? Then there's the elements that are controlled by the environment, where we can control some of those things. Whereas, in terms of, am I going to do a circuit program or am I going to do supersets? Well, depends. If you're working out at LA Fitness on a Monday night, a circuit's not going to work real well. So you need to know that going into it. It's not because circuits are bad. It just doesn't work with that environment. And then there's certain things that are just driven by science. And that's, the basics of, like, if I want to get really, really strong, doing a bunch of sets of 30 to 50 reps is probably not going to get me there. So just understanding how the science lines up with it. And then it's just working down the list and everything lines up. And then you get to your workout. Well, we have what we call the 5 Fs. And the 5 Fs are just your basic checklist to say, okay, we have our foundational movements that we know, the squat, lunge, push, pull, those things. We know that we have to have some level of function in there, that not necessarily function in the sense that we're balancing on Bosu balls and waving body blades, but function like, I'm not going to make you worse off. I'm not going to make
Yeah.
you debilitated. I'm going to reinforce your ability to do what you need to do throughout the day. Then you have fillers. That's where you can make some variations and you can fill some things in. So in between sets of your pull-ups, instead of, talk about what you do last weekend, that's where I can sneak in some T-spine mobility or some ankle mobility, or maybe I do some metabolic work or any of those things. That's where I can fill in some gaps there, based on whatever your goal is. Then I have, your fitness or finishers or things like that. Do I need to have a cardiovascular component, a metabolic component? Do I need to have any of those things in there? So you just kind of work through this list and say, okay, well, once I have this, now I know how to mix and match the meats and the veggies and the toppings. And it's just, and it, again, it looks like you got your custom made burrito at the end of the day, when you're working off the
Yeah.
same line the guy in front of you and the guy behind you had. And you all have different burritos, but it was the same checklist that they worked off of. But then here's the last element that with programming, which kind of takes you again to that top level, is we are dynamic organisms. We don't train cyborgs. And so you may have done everything we talked about. You did a knockout job on creating rapport and trust and buy-in with your initial consultation. You did an incredible evaluation. You dialed in exactly what this person needed. You wrote a program that was systematic, that was reproducible, that was reliable, that had all these elements into it. And then that client shows up Monday morning and they're a different organism than they were a week ago when you established all this stuff, because maybe they rolled their ankle on a basketball game this weekend, or maybe they had a 6-hour flight, or maybe they have an infant at home that kept them up all night, or they went to a dinner party and they had too much wine. And all of a sudden, shit, what do I do with my program? Because they're not really ready for this. I could plow on and just force feed it to them, but that's not going to work real well. So how do I make adaptations and do some dynamic programming on the fly that is adjustable, and so it really now takes it next level?
Yeah, and to be honest, right? Like, what is your rapport with that client? Are you comfortable? Hey, how was last night? How was your weekend? Like, you want to be able to have that sort of comfortable conversation because not only when you ask, hey, how was your weekend? Yes, it's a question. It's a very, very broad question. They could say good, but if you have a good relationship with that individual and you know how to communicate, you can dig a little bit deeper, like, hey, not just how was your weekend, because a lot can happen in 48 hours. Hey, how was that party you were telling me about? Oh man, I went out and had too many to drink on Saturday night, and I rested all day Sunday and I'm still feeling like crap. That is necessary information that will drive your decision making process within the training session. So yes, you're asking how they're doing just to see how they're doing because hopefully you care about them, but also you're gathering sort of fringe information that is not going to directly maybe change your sets and reps. But look, if they spent the entire weekend partying, drinking, getting sunburnt, feeling like crap, like, and it's deadlift day on Monday, guess what? Like, that's the information we need to know ahead of time, because it's important. Because if we try to, square peg round hole, that's just someone getting injured. So, all of this dynamic programming and the stuff that Eric's talking about, yes, you have to be able to sort of think on the fly. But when you have systems, right, and you have the ability to make educated changes, what you're really doing is you're limiting unnecessary mistakes, and you're making targeted decisions because you already have more information, because you've done your due diligence beforehand and you've set up the relationship and the boundaries so you can have honest communication with your client. And that's the beauty of it. And that is where dynamic programming comes in. That is when building rapport and trust. And look, they need to trust you and they need to like you, because at the end of the day, if they don't do those two things, they're not paying to hang out with you.
So one quick note, I always think of this story. A friend of mine who I started off with, we both started in the same big box gym, 25 years ago together. And he used to make a joke about like how trainers, their only thing that they have to talk about with their clients, their only like icebreaker was, hey, what'd you do this weekend? And he goes, Monday and Tuesday, you say, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Thursday and Friday, you say, hey, what do you got going on this weekend? He goes, what do you talk about on Wednesday? He goes, you got to take Wednesdays off. So
I like it.
So, look, we can get deep in the weeds with the whole readiness and recovery thing. And I do, and I've delved into that world. Like we could talk about HRV and breath hold tests and grip strength and CNS testing and all those different things that can really impact and make some decision changes in terms of your programming. But really, it also comes back to communication, and it comes back to letting people know you're listening, but also giving people answers to their struggles. Remember, that's why we're here. We're problem solvers. So like little things like I stole from Andy Galpin his quadrant system, right? And so his quadrant system is this, where you just draw, and I have a whiteboard right next to my desk. And so I'll take a client, a perfect example. I had a client a week or so ago who's like, I'm trying to stick with the workouts. He goes, but I'm just not bouncing back. I'm always sore. I'm just beat up. I'm beat up. And so I drew out the boxes, right? It's 4 squares within a big square. And I said, okay, this top left square, that is your career. That's your work, your business. And I said, the next square next to that on the right, that is your family and relationships, right? Friends, family, all your, relationships, your social circles. The bottom left corner, that's your fitness, your training, your activity. And then that bottom right corner is what I call your reset, your recovery, your rest, all that sort of stuff. I said, here's what you got. You have 10 points as a budget. You have to assign a numerical value to where you think you're at right this minute of today for each one of those categories. So he goes through and he says, okay, well, work is taking a lot of attention. I'm working on selling my business. That's a 4. Like I am balls to the wall with work. Okay, family. I'm trying to do the best I can to balance out. So probably a 3 for family. Okay, you've been sticking with your workouts, right? Yeah, fitness is probably a 2. And I go, okay, well, not a lot left here, buddy. Like we got 1 point left for your recovery and regen and your reset. So you want to know why you're not bouncing back from your workouts and you feel like crap and you're beat up? Because look where you've budgeted your time and your energy. Now, I'm not telling you to go quit your job or stop talking to your family. I'm telling you, this is going to make some sense of why you feel like crap. And so maybe that means we need to dial back your fitness at least for the next week or two until you can get everything in order with some of that other stuff. Um, because if not, you're going to continue to feel like crap, and you're going to think, maybe I'm not working hard enough, or maybe the workouts aren't working, or maybe I'm broken. And none of those things are true, right? But until I have this communication and this education, right? If you're not doing that, if you're not educating them, then really, what are you doing? Like, I've been in gyms, I share gym space with other trainers, and I've literally seen trainers that the only communication I'll see with them do with their client for an entire session is count and count down. 5, 6, 7, or 10 seconds, 5 seconds, time. Like, really? I mean, come on, dude, be better than that. Like, you're just going to count. Like, I can get a 4-year-old to count for me. Like, that's really what you're providing me is count. You're just going to show me some exercise that I could have learned on YouTube for free, and you're going to count, which a 4-year-old could do for me. Why am I paying you?
Yeah. It's well, I think a lot of people think they can do it on their own until they can't. I mean, think about you see it all the time, right? I've seen it so many times on Facebook. They're like, hey, I thought I was going to be able to rebuild my basement, but all I've done is destroy it now. And now I have to hire someone else to come in and fix it and do it the right way. And people do that a lot of the times in fitness. They're like, oh, I just did what I did in high school. Yeah, how'd that work for you? Right. So a lot of people will try to, quote unquote, build their own basement and build their own fitness program. And it might work for a little bit, but what happens when it doesn't? You don't have the skill set to make changes and have the ability to all of a sudden make these appreciable changes that are going to, right the ship and head you in the right direction. They're just not. So, it's one of those things. It's, I think like any profession, when you hire a true professional that's really, really good, it's clear as day the service and the quality of what you're getting. And look, you can tell really, really quickly the quality of service by what you're getting. And look, that happens on day one, right? The rapport and the initial consultation, because that is a fact-finding mission for those potential clients, but it's also an opportunity for you to educate people on why you're different and how you can be a problem solver for them and help guide them through their fitness and wellness journey. And that's really what it's about. And that's why all of these things matter. Because if you skip one of these things, you're missing a vital part of the system. And systems only work when each portion is operating the way it should. And that is why we've spent literally years putting this stuff together and trying to poke holes in it because we understand it's so darn important. When we've been there, we've made the mistakes.
Here's the irony is that, and I'm going to take it from both the professional and from the client side. The irony as a professional is my goal. If you came to me, Mike, as a client today, my goal is to help lead you from where you are now to where you want to be. And ultimately, my goal from a service providing standpoint is I want to make myself obsolete. I don't want you to rely
Yeah.
on me. And so, because of that, I'm going to try to teach you as much as possible. And it's kind of goes back to the old proverb of I can feed you a fish or I can teach you how to fish. Feeding you a fish gives you food for a day, teaching you how to fish gives you food for life. And so, if I can do that, and so I'm trying to get people to kind of go through this process where they didn't know they needed me. Now they figure out that they need me. And then I'm going to get them to the point where they realize they don't need me anymore. Right. And that's kind of that client journey that I want to have. And here's the irony is the more I try to make myself obsolete, the more they keep coming back. Right. I have clients that, we talk about this. Like I have clients literally been with me 20 years, like 15 years, 10 years. And like
Yeah.
I could show up tomorrow and give them the middle finger and they'd be like, what's your problem today? And they just keep,
Yeah.
and they just keep coming back. You know what I mean? Because and it's not because of exercises, right? They've gotten all the exercises. They've sometimes done the same program for years, and with some variations. And so it's about that. If I was able to accomplish this in 6 weeks, imagine what this guy could do for me in 6 months, right? Or just when I thought I learned everything, he taught me something I never thought of before, and it was life changing, right? And it's because I continue to evolve and continue to learn things and add more things into it. I didn't stop, uh, once I got my certification. I am constantly bringing in, and I'm trying to harness things from outside of fitness. We talk about this with all of our guests. You've had some great, like Luca Hosevar and Brandon Marcello, talk about how they try to draw things from other sources and say, how does this apply to what I do in training? Gray Cook is a good example of it. Me and Gray have our own little Oprah book club where we text back and forth once a month. Like, what are you listening to? What are you reading? And taking things from, whether it's Dan Heath or whether it's Malcolm Gladwell or whoever it is, who they're not writing about fitness or talking about fitness, but we're like, this makes sense for fitness. Like, I was just listening, as I told you, I'm kind of going through a bunch of Alex Hormozy stuff, and he's talking about advertising. And he's like, there's three things you got to do with advertising. And he's like, if you need to improve your advertising, you either have to do more, or you have to do better, or you have to do different. Right. And so I just made a note to, like, I need to make a post of this, because it's the same thing for fitness, except people get the order backwards. Where for advertising, he says you want to go more first. And that's where most people go. They say, I'm not getting results, so I just need to work harder. Well, it's probably not. You probably need to do different first. You need to probably, what you're working hard enough. You're just doing the right thing. And then the next step is, okay, well, um, do I need, now I've gotten better down, or most people chase different. Okay, well, F45 didn't work, so I'm going to do Pilates, and Pilates didn't work, so I'm going to do this. And they keep chasing whatever the next new trend is. Whereas you don't need as much difference as you really think. And so we kind of keep those in our back pocket. And if you have a system, you don't empty the clip the first day. You say, okay, let's first change one thing, right? And if you did 0 sets of squats yesterday, one set of squats is 100% more than you've been doing. I don't need to go full board and give you a full 1 hour leg day workout. You haven't done anything in months, right? So knowing how to use those things, and you know how to use the tools in your toolbox, and not just dump the whole toolbox out on day one. That's really the art of having that system of knowing when to pull the trigger on any of these things.
Yeah. And I think, as we sort of, get to the tail end of this, I think a big part of it is, a lot of the times we have to completely overhaul someone's training program, or we need to start from fresh. Often other times people come in and they have the basics. Sometimes we just need to rearrange things for them to make more sense, because maybe they're just putting things in the wrong spot. Like, if you're going to make a pizza, it's pretty simple. You get the bread, you get the sauce, you get the cheese, right? But if you start with just cheese and then you put, everything in sort of the reverse order, it's still going to have the ingredients of a pizza, but it's not going to be anything like a pizza, because the order in which you've done things is not optimal, or it's not even correct. And I think a lot of people do that with training because they don't really even understand, what should go where. And that's a big part of it. It's like people ask us all the time. We've seen this at courses. What's better? Should I start with cardio or lifting? It depends. You're asking the wrong question. So we have to, that's a big part of what we do. Is it's not about what's better, right? It's about what's the situation, what's the given information we have, and what's the goal. And then we can probably tell you what is more optimal. But we can't just say what's better, because we don't know the information. It's like, what's a better restaurant between restaurant A and restaurant B? I don't know. I've never eaten at both. Then I can't tell you. And that's a big part of it. We're problem solvers, and that's what we do. And really the good coaches can solve the larger problems and the more complicated problems, but they can also solve the simple ones. But guess what? It'll never happen unless you have systems and checklists, because you
Well,
will miss things, because humans do.
all right. Yeah, I'm no way I'm going to let you throw out pizza making, and I'm not going to jump on that, because now you're in my wheelhouse, Perry. So let's.
I know. I right when I said that, I mean, I realized I was getting into enemy territory when I was making an Italian food
you're,
example,
you're
but
you're
the point was across.
you're
Okay.
talking to a guy who grew up working in pizzerias. I know it's a shocker, and I'm probably I'm
An
stereotyping it
Italian guy in New
from
Jersey
yeah.
worked at a pizza shop. Big surprise, huh?
You're profiling, Perry. You're profiling. So, but
I'm
with that,
profiling
like,
you.
yeah. But with that, like, why is Papa John's total shit? And you can go to any, a number of great pizza places anywhere in the Northeast, right? So it's not even just, it's the same stuff, right? It's sauce, it's cheese, it's dough, But like the difference between a great versus a shitty pizza is the quality of the ingredients, the skill of the guy making it. Okay, the equipment you're using to make it. The oven will make a huge difference in that. Like all of these elements in the system of how you do it. Like I could spot a rookie pizza guy, from a mile away from how they even put together a pie. So it's like all of these elements matter, and you can scale shit really easily, but it comes and goes. How many fads have we seen, like curves that came and went? It was a great idea. Fitness targeted for women who don't feel comfortable walking into a normal gym. Great idea. Really shitty execution, right?
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes you see great execution, you see a trainer who's super talented, but just has really terrible systems in how they apply it. Right. So how do you blend both? And that's really where we kind of keep poking holes to say, okay, well, what did we do right to be here 25 years later, to have facilities that I was open 12 years, you're going on over 10, to be able to work with the people that we've worked with and do all that. It's really it's being able to be honest with ourselves and say, okay, what did I screw up here? What could I have done better? And if you don't go back and look at your clients' workouts 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, you don't cringe a little bit, that's maybe your problem as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, or maybe you're looking at it and going, wow, there's a lot of similarities. Well, that might be a good thing. Right. And then that's maybe when you start to, maybe potentially think about, well, how can I get better at scaling this? And how can I, find ways to, make this a little bit more sustainable for other individuals? And that is where you start cooking with gas. Right. But, it does. It's one of those things. I wish we could tell you there's a magic bullet, and there's a way to hack your way through this. But we're in the service related industry, and look, like any industry, world of physical therapists for pizza shops, right? There's good pizza shops, there's bad ones, and there's the same thing with everyone that you do, every sort of profession and every service out there. So there's going to be personal trainers around every corner, right? And I think the best thing to do is, go out there and be the best coach that you can, get the best systems, learn from the best individuals, and just create a superior product. And eventually everyone around you is just going to fizzle because they're not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, well, I think a good way to wrap it up is this. I just thought of a story when you're talking about that is there's a pro athlete that I work with. He used to sometimes bring his younger cousin to workouts. And his younger cousin was going to school for exercise science. And so that's why he brought him along, because he wanted to learn from me and so forth. And he was doing his internship at a PT clinic. And so the athlete I was working with had something going on where he just could probably have benefited from some soft tissue work and some manual therapy. So I said, well, hey, could you go to, your cousin's place for the PT? And I said to your cousin, I said, the PT's there any good? He goes, well, if you go, you got to go on Friday, because the guy that was there on Friday is really good, but don't ever go on Tuesday. The guy on Tuesday sucks. So basically my goal since that point in my career is I don't want to be the Tuesday guy. I want to be the Friday guy. Right. And so if any way to kind of wrap that up is like, there's a lot of Tuesday guys out there. Don't be the Tuesday guy, be the Friday guy.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, I don't think we could end on anything better than that. So any other words of wisdom there, Mr. DeGadio? We feel like we're good for today, bud.
That's it. But we're going to definitely be doing more of these where Mike and I kind of go on some rants and tangents. We have a bunch of different topics we're going to talk about related to programming, and whether it's for certain populations or whether certain segments of programming that we're going to focus on. So we'll have more of those, as well as our guests that continue to grow. And if you have any ideas for guests that you'd like to see or topics you'd like to talk about, please drop us a line, give us a DM, and shoot it out to us, because we want to continue to make this the best possible show that we can. But we want to thank you for your support, and thank you for listening. And this has been the Principles of Performance podcast. Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.